Sympathetic magic, a fascinating concept rooted in the idea of imitation and correspondence, has captivated many for centuries.
What exactly does sympathetic magic mean in practice?
It revolves around the belief that by imitating an effect, one can bring it into being.
Right, for many cultures, this relationship defines how they interact with the supernatural.
That's intriguing. Can you explain how the principles of sympathetic magic work in more detail?
Certainly, the term sympathetic magic was popularized by James George Frazer in his book The Golden Bough.
I've heard of that. But who first brought this idea to light?
Richard Andre actually anticipated this in his earlier work.
Frazer categorized sympathetic magic into two main types, those relying on similarity and those based on contact or contagion.
That's interesting. How do these categories function?
The law of similarity suggests that an effect can be created simply through imitation.
And the law of contact?
It claims that once two things have been in contact, they continue to influence each other, even at a distance.
Exactly. So, for instance, if a magician uses a replica of an object, they believe they can invoke the same effect on the real object.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. But does this magic really have any basis in reality?
That's a thoughtful question. We'll touch on that throughout our discussion.
Let's look at the concept of imitation more closely. Practitioners use objects like effigies or poppets to influence their surroundings.
Like voodoo dolls?
Exactly. A voodoo doll can have a lock of hair to establish a connection between that doll and a person.
So whatever happens to the doll happens to the person.
Precisely, this process illustrates the potent nature of sympathetic magic in practice.
That seems powerful, but does it always need a physical item to act upon?
Not necessarily. This magic can operate through various forms of medium, and it raises questions about the deeper connections among individuals. Now let's discuss the concept of correspondence.
What does that entail?
It's based on the belief that you can influence one thing by relating it to another.
Can you give examples of this?
Certainly, many traditional beliefs equate plant properties with certain physical or medicinal effects.
Like how certain herbs are believed to cure specific ailments just based on their appearance?
Exactly. This is a concept known as the doctrine of signatures.
That's wild. Are there any stories that illustrate this?
Typically, folk tales depict a relationship where harming one thing affects another.
One famous example is Koshai the Deathless, where the villain's life is tied to an object. How fascinating is that connection?
Really fascinating. So people believed that even small personal items could be sources of power.
Jumping back in time, sympathetic magic may connect to prehistoric cave art.
Seriously, how did that work?
Joseph Campbell proposed that cave paintings were not just decorations, but rather linked to hunting magic.
Likewise, researchers have identified patterns in ancient artworks, suggesting a ritual significance tied to hunting success.
That sounds incredible. What other examples exist?
There was a rock engraving showing a zebra with symbolic wounds, indicating a ritualistic relationship with hunting.
Rituals linked to art? That's an intense connection.
Absolutely. The connection between shamanism and sympathetic magic is even more profound. Surprisingly, even today, sympathetic magic influences people.
What do you mean?
Psychologist Paul Rozin conducted experiments indicating that people are influenced by perceived connections.
For instance, students refuse to eat fudge shaped like dog feces.
That's quite hilarious, yet fascinating. Did they also avoid items that had contact with certain diseases?
Exactly. The students were reluctant to put on a sweater worn by someone with AIDS.
This makes me wonder, do people apply this concept to objects they perceive as holy?
Yes, even holy water is thought to lose its essence if altered, which reflects how deep-seated these beliefs are.
It's astonishing how these ancient ideas shape modern perceptions.
And yet, the connections are often subconscious.
That's thought-provoking. I'm curious about how these concepts might evolve.
Stay tuned for future chapters. There's much more to uncover.